Ready, set, secure.
Hello everyone and welcome to this video on SIEM Content Management. My name is Brandt Varni and I am the Data Analytics Practice Manager for SET Solutions. Today we're going to be talking about the content you have in your SIEM and what the best life cycle for making sure you have the right content and get the most value out of your SIEM is. So for those of you that saw the previous video series, Planning for a Successful SIEM, you know that we talked about the SIEM being the visibility engine for your SOC analysts. So as they're investigating a particular security incident, what they're wanting to be able to answer is who, what, where, when, and how. And what actually enables them to answer these questions is content that you build out within your SIEM. So when we're talking about SIEM content, what we're talking about is the dashboards, reports, and alerts that are in your SIEM. So as many of you know, there is plenty of out-of-the-box content that comes built into your SIEM. But as I'm sure many of you have experienced, you may turn on one of those alerts and suddenly get tens of thousands of alerts that you just can't respond to. There's too much, too many alerts, and you're not getting any value out of those alerts. They're also not very applicable to your particular environment. So while generally they may detect some good content, if you're trying to protect a particular in-house application that you've built, they don't have the security context related to that application on how to protect it. Another one of the big challenges is around the evolving technology and how quickly technology is changing. So many of these technologies are technologies that many of you use to conduct business, but almost none of them were around 5-10 years ago, definitely not to the extent that they're used today. So the attack surface that we're trying to protect has changed very drastically. To help iterate this, in 2015, the initial release of the MITRE ATT&CK framework had 96 techniques and 9 tactics. 5 years later, so October 2020, the most recent release, had 177 techniques, 348 sub-techniques, and 14 tactics. So as you can see, with technology changing, so is the attack surface, and it's becoming more and more difficult for us to protect our environments and monitor them. So it's critical that we have a strong content lifecycle in place to make sure we have the detections for the changing technologies. So the process we're going to go through today, it can be broken down into 6 steps: define, analyze, develop, test, deploy, review. Let's go ahead and jump into define. So in define, you're really starting at the high level and trying to figure out what is it as an organization we want to protect. You want to make sure this aligns with the overall strategy of your organization and mitigating risk within your organization. Once you have an idea of what it is that's important to you to protect and what risks you need to be mitigating, from there you can start to define what is it I need to try to detect. Once you have those detections defined, you start to analyze what is it I need to put in place to actually build out those detections. So one of the first things you're going to go through is what type of content should I build? How is that detection going to be best consumed by the analyst? Is it going to be a dashboard? Is it going to be an alert? And really making sure that that content you're building is useful for your analysts. Next, you need to really dig into, how do I actually build this detection in my SIEM? What logic should I be using? So we'll take, for example, a brute force attack. So let's say you're trying to see someone brute forcing a password and trying to log in. Do I want to set a static threshold of 10 failed logins in a minute? Or do I want to use some advanced statistics and try to detect anomalies? Another key thing to do during this analysis stage is identify whether or not you have the right data coming into your SIEM, or if you need to go get additional data. And then finally, one of the most important things is defining the response actions, so your SOC analysts know what to do when there is a detection. So for instance, let's say I do get that brute force alert. What do I do as a SOC analyst? What actions are you wanting me to go take? Once you've completed this analysis, you go through and actually develop the content. So here, go create the content using the logic you've identified, onboard any additional data sources that may be required, and build out and document what the response process is. Once you've gone through this development, you really want to start to test and make sure that this content is ready for production. So as we talked about before, you don't want tens of thousands of alerts. You really want to make sure you don't have false positives and there's high value alerts in place for your SOC analyst. So the first thing is try to identify any false positives you can and filter those out. But on the other side, you don't want to filter out too much and make sure we're still having full coverage across our environment. So you want to look for false negatives as well. Make sure you have those filtered out. Once you have the actual alerts or dashboards, you want to make sure that the information you're presenting to the analyst has everything they need. So for instance, let's say you have a firewall log with an IP address. I now need to figure out, well, what do I do with that IP address? By presenting in the dashboard, alert, or report, the IP address, host name, and user, now I have more to work off of and really make my response actions more efficient. And then the final thing is to run through the response process and make sure that you have that process very efficient and that the actions that you are taking will properly mitigate the threat. Once you're done with your testing, you will deploy into production. So one of the key things, and you need to make sure you do during this deployment phase, is having a proper handoff with security analysts to make sure they understand what it is that is expected of them. So when a detection occurs, what does that detection mean? And what response actions do I actually need to take? And the final step is to actually review the content that is in production. So what we highly recommend is you put in place a way to track metrics for your different content you've built out. So an idea of trigger rate, false positive rate. This will help give you a full picture of whether or not your content is useful and if it's providing the value you would expect. You should also get plenty of feedback from your security analysts that are doing the day-to-day work working through these incidents. They may have feedback about ways you can tune the searches further, or if you need to review your response processes. As the ones that are working day to day through those processes, they should have plenty of great feedback for you. You then should take all that feedback and go back into the define phase and really iterate through this process over and over. So by going through this process, you're able to create high fidelity content and make sure you have full coverage within your environment. So if you're not sure how to start or need some assistance getting started, Set Solutions can come in and someone from our data analytics team can come do an assessment of your SIEM, where we'll review the data sources you're bringing in and make sure that your monitoring aligns with your overall security strategy as an organization. We also have a use case library with content for the most popular SIEMs and are happy to work with you to customize this to best fit your environment. The final thing that we can do is help review your incident response processes and make sure that they're efficient and that you're getting the most value and out of your technologies you've invested into and properly mitigating the threats. Thank you for your time. I hope you enjoyed the video.